My name is Odessa Primus, and I am a young leader this year speaking on migration. And I'm here with Gervais Appave, a senior director to the Director General
yes.
of the IOM, International Organization on Migration.
Right.
So we were just on a panel together on migration. I have a few questions.
Sure.
So the first one, what in your opinion are the most effective ways to address the root causes of irregular migration so that everyone can benefit?
Sure. Well, I think that the best way to address any aspect of migration, whether it's regular or irregular, is first of all to accept it for the reality it is, the social and economic reality that it is today. There is a danger of looking at specific aspects and trying to find answers just to that part of the issue. To give you an example, we very often hear people talk about migration crises these days. And there is a sense that the crises have to be resolved. And they must be resolved. But that is only part of the picture. Beyond the crisis, there is another side to migration, in the sense that mobility is very much part of our social and economic reality. People move in this world. You move and I move. We've come here to work. So there are millions of other people who want to do the same thing. So, in brief, how do we find an answer to that? Well, first of all, by developing a comprehensive approach to migration. One that will deal with labor migration. Many people want to work. Let's give them that opportunity. There are other people who move because of natural disasters. Let's address their particular situation. And then we have to deal with issues such as border management. The border is, if effectively managed, is not a barrier. It's a place of exchange where people meet and come through. And we need integration policies. I could go on. But if we address all these issues, then we have a better chance to address migration in its entirety.
Yeah, I feel like migration has been detoned to all these various, we need to distinguish different kinds of migration.
Sure.
The panel we were on, if you call something migration, it's like calling a panel economy.
Sure. Exactly.
It has nothing to do with specific types of irregular migration, refugees, asylum seeking. It is simply movement around our planet.
Sure. I think we're going through a transitional period. The world is coming to terms with migration. Look, and it's very important to realize that it's happened very, very quickly. We've moved from a world where people essentially were born, lived and died in the same place, to a world where people now have movement inscribed in their life pattern somewhere. And we must manage that transition.
Yeah, it's quite natural. I went to university to a different country.
Indeed.
I've lived in different countries, and it is very natural, especially everybody moves because of jobs. It doesn't have to mean that there are no jobs where you're from.
Sure.
And it also can mean that you're moving because of jobs lacking in where you're living. The second question, are you optimistic that the approaching global compact on migration will have a real and positive impact on development and reaching the SDGs, and why? Particularly given the continuing changes and negative climate on migration among many states right now.
Well, I'll borrow a sentence from a friend of mine who's worked in the field of migration for a long time, and who says that when you work on migration, you're condemned to be an optimist. In other words, you must have the strength to look beyond the issues, beyond the problems, and to try to find answers. So yes, I'm optimistic about the Global Compact. One of the reasons why this is the case is because I think it's too easily forgotten that it is the culmination of a learning process that's taken many years. If you go back 60 years, at the end of the Second World War, every country had its own migration program. It was, in effect, dealing with migration in a unilateral way.
Yes.
Starting in the 90s, countries came to realize very quickly that it was impossible to manage it unilaterally. In other words, you needed the cooperation of other countries. And we went through a process of consultation, high-level dialogues, global forum on migration and development, and then finally the summit last year in September in New York, where the international community committed to the development of that compact. So if I read the trend line and I don't focus on the crises, then I see a positive trend line. Now, much will depend on the negotiations. We'll have to see. But the consultations have started, and they've been very good. We are now unpacking the issues. That will continue until November, before we really enter into an assessment of those consultations and then the development of the compact. So I think that it will be a step forward rather than a step backward.
Yeah. We need a comprehensive approach that needs to be coherent throughout all the people that are involved and all the countries that are involved.
Indeed.
Because it gets more complex with everyone that enters, because every country is different and every sort of migration is different. So it needs to have a lot of detail.
Sure.
And I find all agreements usually lack in detail, but I'm also hopeful for this one.
Thank you.
People are key to reaching the SDGs. How can people, especially young people, make a contribution to the Agenda 2030?
What a
This
good,
could be tips for me.
what a good question. Well, first of all, I think their engagement in itself is a very strong and powerful sign that they care. Not everyone cares. Not everyone cares. But for those who care about development, I think engagement is the first step. But then I think there are many practical ways in which they can help. One of which, and I know because I listened to what you said during the panel earlier today, is to be engaged with people in a practical way. Look, there's going to be enough work for academics. There's going to be work for policymakers. But these people very often are not at the sharp edge of things. And they need feedback from what's happening there. People like you have the flexibility, the adaptability to go and see what is happening. So feeding back that reality, I think, is extremely important.
I think this is a resource that needs to be tapped into, because what you just said, I can just get on a plane
Indeed.
and I can go there and I can do what needs to be done and then share this experience.
Sure.
And we need to have more inclusivity at the table of youth and people that are engaged, especially people that are not necessarily working for big institutions and big organizations.
Absolutely.
Those are the ones that see all the details,
Sure.
that don't have to go through all the bureaucracy and the policy to see what the situation is like.
Sure.
They just go there and they observe.
Sure. Two other ways in which I think you can help. One of which, forgive me if it's a bit of a naive observation, but policymakers like me are old and tired. We've tried it all. We need youth to bring a sense of energy. And you can do that in ways which I cannot. I can talk policy language, sit with people, but we've got grids of analysis, ways of thinking that are fairly set. You can break these and suggest new ideas. And finally, I think there's a third way in which you can help, which is to change the narrative on migration. Again, as you know, migration is a topic that's heavily laden with negativity. Migrants are seen as problem people. And very often when we speak about root causes, we are saying, let's get rid of that problem. Let's keep them over there. They don't have to come here. That is counterfactual. As I explained, we live in a world of mobility. It's going to happen. We need young people to say, hey, you know what? It's part of our reality. Let's come to terms with it.
Yes, I was speaking to someone yesterday, someone who works at DEFCO, who is tired of hearing or people saying that they are an expat.
Sure.
Expat is someone cool that teaches English in a country, or they're a musician,
Sure.
but really we're migrants.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is no difference between someone that's come to a country and teaches English and does some theater, and someone that's come to the country to find a better job or any kind of mobility, really.
And that's the kind of new language that we really need.
So we should stop differentiating expat and migrant, because I mean, I don't know what the two definitions are in some dictionary, but I highly doubt they're very different.
For sure.
Okay.
I think I've got some questions for you now.
I see that too.
Okay. First question. What do you think are the most important contributions that migrants bring to their host countries and societies?
This is a question that touches home for me because my organization in Prague, Go Think Initiative, what we are trying to do is we're trying to bring information about different cultures to people in Europe so that not only are we more interconnected and we have a bigger understanding of the world and international relations and different cultures, but when things like that the past 2 years happen and we have people coming from countries that we have not necessarily explored, we don't know very much about, we need to understand who they are. And we need to understand that when we have a stereotype being thrown at us in the media, we need to know it's a stereotype. We need to know that the information is quite different, and we need to be able to defend that because we are all one people. So I think there's a huge, huge benefit of any sort of migration is that they bring their culture with. They bring new knowledge. And people go to study, to university, and they study medicine, they study literature. That's all new information. It's just the same kind of information when we find out about different cultures and religions. And that's so necessary.
And what would you say to people who say, but I'm uncomfortable with the fact that they come to abuse our social system just to get benefits and allowances or to abuse our health benefits. What answer do you have to that kind of criticism?
Well, first of all, yes, that does happen, and we cannot pretend that it doesn't and try to be only on one side of the argument. But most of the time, if you look at the data, if you look at the statistics, if you ask the information at the migration office anywhere, it's not really true, usually. Usually, it's an exaggeration of the facts. Usually, it's used to promote policy, far-right policy, to get populist sentiment out and get the votes. But information is such a valuable resource, and it's available. Now we're so connected, more than ever. Pretty much anybody, at least in Europe, can reach the internet and search for anything. But we are not really using those tools, and one of the mistakes is that we are not being taught to use the tools. We're not being taught about algorithms on social networks that only show us what we are already interested in. We're not taught about the media and how journalism works. And we are not taught about politicians talking about rhetoric or politicians talking about things in a way that bring them votes, but not really getting to the facts. And we're also not taught that the way that anybody expresses themselves, whether it's the media, whether it's an individual, whether it's an entire people, that influences how we see that issue. If I tell you in a very well-structured way an argument for one side, you might believe me, even though I'm not really telling you all the information. If I'm convincing, I will get a lot of people to believe me.
Thank you very much. And my last question, which is a big one. What do you think EU leaders, policymakers, and international organizations can do better to make sure that the potential of migration for development and reaching the SDGs is fully realized? It's the reverse of the question you put to me. What is it that international organizations, EU leaders, policymakers can really do to make things change?
I'm not going to repeat my whole spiel about information, but definitely involving different layers of society. So more involvement and empowerment of civil society organizations. Inclusivity, an invitation to the table. Sure. I think decision-making often happens with people that have been involved sitting in the same office for many years, and it needs to have a fresh input. So involving the youth, because as much as policy is important and necessary right now, and the people that have a lot of experience in education make them, the youth are the ones that are going to be implementing it. We are the ones, and I'm saying youth, I'm a young leader, so I have to identify with that. But we are the ones that are going to be living through it. So if we don't understand it, and if we don't have an input into how it's being made, then it's not going to work for us, because we are the ones that know what our generation, how it works, and how we get our information. And if the policy is made without us, it won't resonate with us when we're part of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I've heard it very clearly, the case for openness and inclusivity, and making sure that all stakeholders have a part in the discussion.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.